Now, I want to compare a little bit Gary's game with Gordon's game. They're both trained in the same system. They both have many similarities, but they have striking differences. Like I love Gary, but I see him like he's more of a cowboy. He's a wild man. He's the most entertaining grappler. He's my
Yes.
favorite grappler. He's my favorite grappler, but I feel like if he approached the game like Gordon, which is more methodical, he would be less entertaining, but maybe he would have won a few key matches because he's got all the technique, he's got all the skill. And actually, training with Gary is the funnest. If you're in the practice room, Gary's the funnest. Why? Because Gary will he'll let you take his back. He'll let you get on top of him, and he'll do this escape over and over again. And he's just phenomenal guy who doesn't stop moving. He just doesn't stop. Like you'll never see him be in a static position and hold it. No, he's always on the next maneuver. The next, he's just phenomenal. He's my favorite grappler to watch. But does this come down to their personalities?
Yeah, there's two things that'll determine your game: your personality and your body type. These outside of technique, those are the main factors. Okay, so I teach the same techniques to everyone, but I also understand that every one of them has a different personality and a different body type. And so outside of a few fundamental techniques, I never impose techniques on people. I tell them what I like. I tell them what I believe would work for them, but I never impose things upon them. I never say, you're learning this. There's only been a few exceptions to that. I forced Garry Tonon to learn a guillotine because he's so good at scrambling. I thought it would be a tragedy if he didn't learn a good guillotine. So I forced him to do that. But outside of that, I encourage my students to let their own body type and their own personality organically build their game.
But like Gordon has like the perfect guard. He sits down, he does the perfect guard. You're not gonna beat him. You're not gonna pass him. He's either gonna sweep you or sub you, or it's gonna be a draw. Like he has very few vulnerabilities. I feel like Gary is like, hey, I'm
Gary's
putting on a
game,
show. We're
yeah,
coming here, we're gonna fight.
yeah.
You know, winning is yes, it's on the table, but I'm gonna come here and like he has this different approach, which is wildly entertaining, but he might let a point here or there go by because of it.
Part of Gary's modus operandi is to offer opportunities to an opponent, and that can create some of the most brilliant victories of all time, and it can also lose you a match.
Another favorite match of mine of all time. I watched it countless times. I refer to it all the time to my students. Gary versus Gilbert Burns. Very different approach than Gordon would have done. Gary willingly lets the guard pass, turns his back, exposure, giving exposure to Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns, much bigger, much stronger, more experience. I think Gilbert has more years of training.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's a black belt longer than Gary.
I think he was a black belt longer than Gary been doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, how are you going to beat this guy who's bigger, stronger, didn't make weight, if I remember correctly? Yeah. He's just physically bigger, knows everything you do. Like he's been doing jiu-jitsu longer than you. Maybe not the same style, but Gary gives him exposure over and over again. Just so confident. And Gilbert is known for rear naked choke and smash passing. Like, just take it. Go ahead. Try to take my back. And those of you who didn't see the match, you have to watch it. He ends up brilliantly spinning into rolling into a leg, putting on a heel hook. No man could resist that heel hook. Like I mean, it's on. Your leg is gonna break. It's not gonna be a pain thing. The knee is gonna break, and he gets the tap. Incredible victory. But if that was Gordon, let's say pound for pound, I think Gordon would win too. But he would have won in a very different way. But they're both training the same system.
But very different personalities,
very different personalities. But it's amazing because Gordon would have just played guard and eventually I think gets in the legs or sweeps. But two guys in the same system all the time and two different. Gary may be more entertaining, but Gordon I think more point oriented.
Yeah.
Like he'll get the points on the board more often, I would say.
Yeah. Gordon is the more high percentage approach. Gary is the more entertaining approach. Interestingly, after that match, Gilbert Burns came up and talked to us. He's a lovely guy, and he came up and he said, "Man, I was winning that whole match." And he's like, "Then out of nowhere, you just got me with that damn heel hook." And
you're gonna have to speak up a little bit.
Sorry. And so we showed him in the lobby of the hotel.
Oh, really?
The roll in, and he was just like crazy.
It is. I mean, those are old school moves, but done in a new way. Done in a way, like honestly, the way he did it, the way he came back, he rolled, and Gilbert based. I would have went back to guard. No, Gary pulls back, like it reverses the action, gets into that heel beautifully. Like I watched it. I don't know how many times I've watched it. And the Ashigurami entry from gut wrench.
Yes.
Where he kind of goes into a wrestling switch, but pulls an Ashi. That kind of stuff, man, it's so fatiguing. I'm on top of you. I'm gut wrenching you. You're supposed to be under attack. You're supposed to be
And
under
then
pressure.
suddenly you're fighting your way out of
All of a
it.
sudden, the guy's on my leg, and I'm trying to get out of this position. It's
Yeah.
fatiguing because gut wrench usually is fatiguing for the guy on the bottom. I'm about to jump on your back. Gilbert Burns, who wants that guy on his back? Nobody. And he turns it into a switch, keeps the scrambles going. Not something Gordon would have done, I think, in gut. Like I don't think we've ever seen Gordon in gut wrench. But what does Gordon do in gut wrench? Let's say.
He probably would have had double trouble. He's also a big fan of gravity rolls.
Right.
He would have taken a safer
option.
Sure.
With Garry, kill, attack. I love him. You gotta love him for it, man. He's a real Rambo. He's a real commando out there. What? Look, I gotta ask you, what made the DDS so special? They had a super great entertainment factor. They were winning all the time. I can't even remember one of them losing, to be honest with you. Like especially like in the EBIs, I feel like
I think there were a bunch of factors here. First, they were always the underdogs because they had only been training for a very short period of time.
Right.
When Eddie, Garry, Gordon, and Nicky first came to me, they were very, very young and they were very inexperienced. And this, I think, the most accomplished was Garry. He had won some tournaments as a brown belt.
He was a brown belt at the time. I remember.
He was the most accomplished, but Gordon
he was a half guard player.
Yeah. He mostly used to scramble from half guard to the back.
I remember. You brought him to Tristar once upon a time.
Yeah, for the Nick Diaz fight.
I remember putting him to sleep in the darts on the mat. Not that I could do that today. No, don't believe me. He's repaid me back many times over. But he was a great grappler, but good potential. But
he was essentially
a half guard guy with a back control. Yeah. Like he had a good arena control. They called him what do they call him again?
The Lion Killer.
Lion Killer. That was his sub. He didn't have much. He didn't have no leg locks.
Pull bottom half guard, roll left and right, squirm his way to the back, and go for a
leg. Great back taker. No leg locks at the time.
And so I think part of the appeal was, okay, they were always the underdog because they had trained for far less time than all of their opponents. None of them had trained more than 3 or 4 years when they first came out, with the exception of Garry Tonon. And secondly, they had something that was different. Okay, they were using leg locks weren't new, but they were using them in ways where people looked at and said they're doing something different.
The patterns and entries were different, John. Yeah. We didn't know them. We were watching it, and we're like, we trained with John. We never learned that, And I remember.
But you guys were in the MMA program.
We're in the MMA program. We're not as.
This was like a specialized submission.
It was a new way of doing things.
Yeah. So I think 1 was the underdog factor. 2 was the innovation factor. They were doing things differently. And 3 was the aggression factor. These kids were coming out. They weren't looking to win by advantage. They were looking to get to you and make you submit.
Which honestly was wildly entertaining.
Yes.
Super good.
Like, think about it for us. In your first day in Jiu-Jitsu, when you came in and you looked at it, and you were like, hey,
I thought it was gay at first when I first saw it.
when
I first saw it, what are these guys doing on the ground?
We won't cover that. But, okay, let me talk about my experience. Let me talk about my experience.
You gotta be honest. I mean,
okay.
We're like, what is this?
When I first entered, I was like, okay, I want to pursue this. This is interesting. And what made me want to pursue it over time was the idea of submission holds. The prime appeal of Jiu-Jitsu was the idea of making the other guy quit. Okay.
Yes,
I didn't.
Then it's manly. Then I'm like, yeah, you know what? This is very manly.
I didn't want to learn Jiu-Jitsu to learn how to get an advantage by getting to half guard.
Yeah, and holding a guy down.
Yeah, that has no appeal. All of us, I think, everyone watching this podcast will agree that the prime appeal that makes you do Jiu-Jitsu, makes it interesting, makes it worthwhile studying, is the idea of control to submission. And no one's interested in people that win by advantage or by the minimum amount possible. They want the maximum result, which is submission. And the squad had the philosophy that they were only interested in winning by submission. And so I think there was the underdog factor. There was the aggression factor, the fact that they were always constantly looking for submission, and there was the innovation factor, that they were doing it in a way which was substantially different from everyone else in the sport. I think that those 3 things are the prime appeal of the squad.
I also really liked Eddie Bravo's approach to overtime. I thought that also gave a stage to make things more like a shootout. I remember talking to him about it. He's like, I'm going to make it like a soccer game, a penalty shootout. And I think that also the day had to end with somebody most of the time getting tapped. I love the appeal of having a no time limit sub only, but who has 3 hours?
Yeah, no one.
It sometimes it's the matches will be literally hours long. I think it was a great platform to really show how entertaining jiu-jitsu can be. Because you're right, nobody wants to see two guys lying down on top of each other with no end. Like I scored a point on you, and I'm going to lock you down, buckle you down, and let the time run out. That gets boring. But the DDS was far from that. It seemed like every time somebody escaped a submission, they would follow right back into another, and it was wildly entertaining.
Interestingly, all three of the students I had into EPI, Garry Tonon, Gordon Ryan, and Eddie Cummings, were able to secure all matches won by submission in regulation. Gary on multiple occasions. They were the only athletes who were able to do this, I believe.
And what was the time limit again? It was 10 minutes.
10 minutes, which is a pretty long match.
Yeah, it's very tough. It's very tough. But what's the difference between DDS and New Wave? Now you're going by New Wave.
Yeah, there's stylistically there's no difference. It's just there was a series of growing personality conflicts within the squad, which caused a rift over time. And everyone agreed that ultimately the best way to cure the rift was separation.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that was sad.
There was something special about that group.
Yeah, there was. I do think that something magic was lost when they separated. There's no question.
Is there, and you don't have to answer, is there any hope for reconciliation? The DDS getting together again? For one last storm of the tournaments? Maybe we work together for 3 months. We do this one tournament, and the DDS versus DDS versus the world. How about this? DDS gets together for 60 days. DDS versus the world.
That would be an amazing documentary, let me tell you. I'm an optimist by nature, and I believe that most people, given time, conflict tends to resolve itself over time. So I'm confident that over time things will get resolved. But currently, they have a gym. They operate it. They do the same thing we used to do when we were together in New York and Puerto Rico, and they seem to be doing a great job of it. And they're happy living their lives, and we're happy doing what we do, and that's what it's all about.
Amazing.